What's up, beautiful people? Hope you're doing well. I'm so grateful to be back on with you on day 3 of election time here in the beautiful country of Canada. So much has happened, and the biggest conversation today is tax cuts. And that is the language that most people like to speak is money. Carney talked about what he was going to cut yesterday, and then Poilievre came out today and said, yeah, I'm going to double it. And that has been the talk of today. This is, again, the beauty of politics, the beauty of posturing, the beauty of how this all works. Poilievre waited in the weeds, waited for Carney to announce his tax plan. Poilievre said, cool, I'm going to double it. And we actually have a way to double it that's going to save money for our people and as well still be able to bring in the revenue we need to do. And that is one, is he talked about cutting away the excess, the bureaucracy, the foreign aid, wasteful spending, all these things is what he's been talking about. And it's very exciting to watch all of it go down now. But before we start today's show, the biggest announcement of it all is the debates have been announced. We're looking at April 16th and to 17th. April 16th will be the French debate. The 17th will be the English debate. We will see Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre and then the others on stage talking some trash, talking their policies, talking how they're going to make Canada great. So we'll see how this all goes down. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk what Carney's putting forward. We're going to talk what Poilievre's putting forward. We're going to talk about the difference between the two and and how much money it's going to save you. And when we'll get into the discussions, the nuances of how this all is going to work, because there's actually, amidst all the excitement, there's some misinformation out there, and people I don't think are meaning to mislead. It's just sometimes it's just a misunderstanding of how the tax code works and the marginal tax system we were on, and we'll go into all that, shall we? So let's get into it. Carney and Poilievre promised tax cuts on day 1 of election campaign. In a press release, the Liberal Party said more than 22 million Canadians would benefit from their proposed tax cut, which is said would save 2-income families up to $825 a year. Carney did not specify how much the tax cut would cost the government. Across the Ottawa River in Gatineau, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre reiterated his promise of a tax cut on work, investment, energy, and home building. And again, this was yesterday, right? Mark Carney announced this yesterday. Pierre Poilievre announced his today. And again, this is all part of the politicking. So you have Mark Carney, who promised a 1% marginal tax cut. So what he's going to be doing is the first tax bracket, which is the first $55,500-ish of a Canadian earner's salary, is taxed at about 15%. And so Mark Carney wants to take that 15% and take it down to 14%, which on average save $57,000 earner about $585 a year. Nothing to sniff at. It's a little under $50 a month. That's how much they would save. So the people who haven't seen a tax cut in a long time and have seen essentially their wages essentially garnished by the federal government over the past 10 years, a tax cut is very welcome, especially by those who are starting to see Carney as a potential candidate for them they would want to vote for. It's like, oh, 1%, we get some money off. Life's good. Let's go. I'll take it. And that was the excitement over yesterday. And then Pierre Poilievre came out this morning and says Conservatives pledge income tax cut amounting to 15% for average income earner. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is promising an income tax cut that he says will save a dual income family around $1,800 per year. Poilievre says he would lower the lowest income tax bracket from 15% to 12.75% and fund this by trimming federal government bureaucracy. He says this would cut income taxes by 15% for the average Canadian who makes $57,000 a year, leading to a savings of about $900 a year. Poilievre, who's holding his first campaign event today at Paper Products at plant in Brampton, Ontario, says the measure will include seniors and that modest income people will save the most by percentage. You have Mark Carney, who says he's going to cut it by 1%. Pierre Poilievre came out and said he's going to cut it by 2.25%, over double Mark Carney's promise, which those numbers are accurate. It's a significant amount of money for the average person and those who are in those, especially for those who are in those income brackets. It's going to be, you're going to feel it more on a positive level than those who are making $80, $90, $100, $120, $130,000 a year. But regardless of who you are, because he's taking down a huge percentage of the lowest income bracket, that means everyone's going to save money, because on a marginal tax system, you are taxed on the first $55,500 that you earn. No matter how much you earn, you're always going to be taxed that amount on that amount of money. Then the brackets change based on a marginal basis, based on how much you make as you go up. That's how it works. That's how it operates. People are very excited, and understandably so. And you should be excited. That is a significant cut in a big way. But the issue that we're seeing right now on social media and online is people are tending to conflate both numbers from Carney and Poilievre. And as much as not a huge fan of Liberals, not a huge fan of what Carney's trying to do, I do want to be fair in the theme of good faith. So right now I'm seeing people saying Poilievre is promising 15% tax cut and that Carney's only given us 1%. And so what you're doing there is not totally fair to the argument. Yes, Carney's taking 1% off of the tax rate. Poilievre's not removing 15% off the tax rate of the lowest income bracket. That's just not, he's not going from 15 to 0. That's not what's happening. He went from 15 to 12.75, which is a 2.25% tax cut. And that is where I want us to kind of look at these numbers. Again, these are how the tax brackets operate. This is the one in question, which is the top one that's highlighted, 15% on the first $55,867. And then again, your tax based on a progressive level marginally. Let's do a proper compare and contrast, shall we? Carney's 1% tax cut would be about a 6.5% savings a year, which a $57,000 a year earner would save about $558 per year, a little less under 50 bucks a month. Poilievre was promising a 2.25% cut, which would be about 15% savings a year. A $57,000 a year earner saves about $1,200 a year. Ignore the typo there. I got a little too excited. But on top of that, Poilievre will be cutting all carbon pricing. So not only is Pierre Poilievre cutting more, he's also getting rid of a few more variables that are actively stealing money away from you. Carney's not promising that. He's promising less of a cut, and he's also keeping carbon pricing on the industrial level and not cutting any other taxes or any other income suckers that this government has instituted over the past 10 years. So with Poilievre, you're getting a much bigger difference, and you'll be getting a lot more money back in your pocket, which I think is a positive for everybody. But again, I just wanted to make this abundantly clear. I hate seeing the argument of Carney's only cutting 1%, while Poilievre's cutting 15%. Those are two very different numbers. Poilievre's 15% is that you're 15% in savings. And then you're comparing it to Carney's 1% cut on the marginal tax rate. Those are two very different things. Those are just not fair. What the comparison needs to be is you're going to get 6.5% savings with Carney's cut, and then you'll get a 15% savings with Poilievre's cut. That's comparing apples to apples and being fair in an argument. I just wanted to call that out because I hate that the left is very unfair and acts in bad faith consistently when they talk about these issues. But I just wanted to make this one abundantly clear, making sure you're comparing the proper apples to apples of what's happening here. This is still exciting though. This is really awesome. And this was the first thing I had anyone text me about today. There's like, Poilievre, 15%, this is crazy. And that is a lot of money. I know Poilievre's numbers are saying somewhere in the $900 range. The numbers I ran were closer to $1,200, at least for a $15,000 a year earner. It's regardless, in that ballpark, that's a lot of money. You're coming up in close to $90 to $100 a month in savings just on a tax cut. This is not including the other taxes they're going to be taking off the board on top of that. It was a big win and would be a big win for Canadians. But the fascinating thing, as Carney has introduced his tax cuts and introduced his promises, he was asked about it in Gander, Newfoundland today. The question came about was like, okay, so you're giving this tax cut, but it doesn't seem to totally map out equal to what the carbon rebate was that you all had promised for so long. So can you work out that math for us? And this was how that answer went.
During the Liberal leadership race, you said that your middle class tax cut would offset the loss of carbon rebates. The cut you offered is up to $825. The rebates were as high as $1,800 for a family in Alberta. I'm just wondering how you square that math.
We do square the math. We have squared the math. A couple of things. One is you look at where the rebate is today. You net the. I'm going to look at the camera because you moved behind it, but I can't look you in the eye. But you square it with the carbon price. Carbon tax, so-called, that people are no longer paying because the rebate is obviously a gross amount. You have to net off the carbon tax that's being paid. So you have our tax cut today versus that rebate and the net of the carbon tax that has gone away. Plus, we have added the rebate, an extra quarter of the rebate that goes directly to people without the carbon tax. So for a median income, a family of earning $50,000, they come out ahead.
That was the answer to that. Well, he kind of, works around the bush a little bit, doesn't really fully answer the question. And he's like, yeah, but someone who's earning $50,000 a year, they trust me, they'll come out ahead. I guess technically true. That is true based on, if you're talking about those factors specifically, you're taking away the carbon tax on the consumer and you're putting this tax cut in, you're essentially bolstering the middle class from your perspective. However, The one thing he dances around and doesn't talk about is the fact that, yeah, you're cutting the consumer carbon tax and you're giving out one more extra payment of carbon rebates that he's going to go ahead and do. He doesn't acknowledge that how much is the industry going to cost? How much is the industry carbon tax going to be sent to consumers? He said on a price of a vehicle, it'd be no more than an extra $200. We know that that's likely inaccurate, but then you add that to everything else that steel is made out of. And then what's that all end up equating to over the course of a year and things that you're purchasing? Who knows? All I know is everything you purchase is steel or has a variation of steel in it. Those carbon taxes that are put onto the manufacturer, who then will pass it on to you, you will be paying that extra cost at some point in the economic cycle. So the $585 a year you're saving, it's just going to be hidden elsewhere in your finances. But you'll not be aware of it because that's how this is operating. It's a shadow carbon tax, which he has talked about persistently. But this is the big news. This is the news of today. Big savings for Canadians. And I have to admit, Poilievre's policy announcement on this got me really excited. That is a significant amount of money a year back in our pockets. And on top of that, removing the carbon tax, not only from consumers, but also industry, Canadians will actually come out ahead, unlike Carney trying to do a little bit of smoke and mirrors to try to look like Canadians are going to be coming out ahead. And so after this announcement, this is kind of what we're looking at here, folks. This is the poly market. Again, it is what it is. It's people putting their money on who they think are going to win. We saw this huge change, right? And we saw Carney and Poilievre converging, diverging, converging again, diverging again, and coming back to converging. Poilievre and Mark Carney are back to neck and neck after these announcements over the past couple days. So we will see what happens. If you put $50 on it right now on Pierre Poilievre, you will make $100. So we'll see how this goes. It is exciting to see that things are moving, and it's essentially what we're going to be seeing from here on out. I was talking to Reg a bit about this. I believe the next 34 days of this election campaign are going to be like the 12 days of Christmas. Every day, Pierre Poilievre is probably going to release a new policy of some sort, or at least every other day. That's kind of how it feels at this point. So we'll see what happens as we move forward. But the excitement is there. The excitement is real. And we will continue to ride this blue wave. We'll see what happens, and we'll continue having the conversation moving forward. But enjoy your day. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see what happens tonight, and I'll be covering that for tomorrow morning's episode. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.